All right, so this one we're going to do an iRig. It's going to be very simple as far as iRigs go. You can do this multiple ways, but I'm just going to show a very, probably like one of the more basic ways, and it's using completely spherical eyes. If you're using eyes that aren't spherical, then it becomes a little more complicated, and it is possible, like I've done it, but that's not what this video is going to be about because I didn't plan it at all. I'm just going to kind of do it off the cuff, and the reason for doing this video at all is because I noticed there is a YouTube member that I have that has been asking about it for a while, and why not? Let's just do it. So I'm going to start off by creating a very simple like object for a head. So it's just going to be a cube. We can press Ctrl-2 to add the subdivision surface modifier. You can see that's what this is right here. Then we can scale it up on the Z-axis, and that's all we're gonna do for the head. Now let's add some eyes. And again, I said we're gonna be using like perfectly spherical objects. So I'm gonna use a UV sphere for the eye. And we can just rotate this on the X by 90 degrees. And this is nice because, you know, it's already kind of looking like an eye with the pole right there. We can scale this down, and I'm just gonna bring it to the side a little like that and set it where I want on one side. When we have the size and the rotation that we like, make sure you apply the rotation and scale. Then we can add a mirror modifier. And for the mirror object, make sure you use the head. Otherwise, it's not going to mirror properly because the origin point is in the very center right here. The origin point being in the center is another important thing to note because when we rotate it, you can see the eyes actually like kind of rotate properly in a way that we would expect. If this is off center, let me just move it off center. In object mode, when we rotate it, you can see they're kind of like moving around more than expected. So it's nice to leave the origin point in the center. That's going to be important for when we add bones also, but I can show you a way around that, so don't worry too much about it. All right, so let's add some bones now. So Shift A, add in an armature, and under Object Data Properties, under Viewport Display, let's turn on in front so we can actually see it. I'll turn on names, and I'll turn on axes too, because why not? We can always turn it off later if we want. So with that selected, let's hit tab to go into edit mode. And this is just going to be the head bone. I'm just going to, you know, size this to the head. You don't really need this for, you know, an eye rig because it's not a head rig, it's an eye rig, but it's very likely that if you're making a character, it probably has a head and that's probably where the eyes are. So it's it's useful to add this. Let's rename it by pressing F2 and I'll just name it head. Now I want to add a bone in the very center of the eye so that it rotates properly. So let's go back into object mode, select the eye, and because the origin point is in the very center where we want it, let's press Shift S and cursor to selected, and it will move the cursor to the origin point right there, which is nice. If the origin point isn't in the very center, like I said, another thing you can do is just go into edit mode and select this center ring right here. You can do that with Alt and left click and it should select that ring. And then you can Shift S, cursor to selected, and it will select the same spot basically. So that's another way to do it if your origin point isn't in the center. Okay, so let's go back into, let's select the armature, go back into edit mode, and we can just press Shift A and it should spawn a bone right at the origin point right there. But I want this to be pointing out this way. So the way that I like to do that is by pressing N to open the side panel. And with this bone selected, we can just turn the length all the way down. And then we can, oh, my bad. Let's do that again. You don't want the whole bone selected. You only want the tip selected right here. So now let's turn it all the way down and we can pull this out like that. And you can see it, you know, I only have the tip selected. So the end piece actually, the head stays in place. So I usually like to make this a little longer than the eye. That way, if we have in front turned off, you can still have, you know, the end piece to select. Let's name this bone. So select it, F2, and I'll name it I.L. And we can symmetrize this. We can right click, symmetrize, and it will bring it to the other side and also give it a .R at the end. The .L and the .R are important for when you're posing. That's how it figures out what is on what side. It's useful for like flipping and mirroring poses and stuff like that. So if you want to be able to flip and mirror poses, then make sure that you name it the way that I'm naming it. Okay, so these are going to be the only deforming bones that actually, you know, deform the mesh right here. So now we can parent this up. I'm just going to select the eyes and the head. It doesn't matter whether they're separate objects or not. Sometimes it's nice to keep them separate like this. Sometimes it's nice to join them up. It doesn't really matter. Select both of those, shift select the armature, control P, and I'm gonna do armature deform with empty groups. Now we need to actually, do the weights, because if we go into pose mode, these are not actually going to be deforming anything. So the way we can do that is by selecting the eyes. I'll just select everything right here. This is supposed to be the left eye. So let's select that vertex group and press assign. It's important that the weight is set to 1 for this also. So now this is actually assigned. And if we move the bone around, this should work. This side also does. And if you're using a mirror modifier, it's also important to make sure that it's in this order with the mirror modifier first, because if you do it the other way around, let's check it out, then this side doesn't work because this is the mirrored side and this side moves both sides. So if you're using the mirror modifier, make sure that it's first, or you can just apply it and that should work also. Okay, so it doesn't really matter. You can do it whichever way you want. It's just important that they're in that order with the mirror modifier first. Okay, so the head, we also have to make that deform. So select the head, go into edit mode, select the head vertex group and assign it like that. So now the head should work also. Let's go back into edit mode. We want to make sure that the eyes are parented to the head. So select the eye, let's select both of the eyes and then the head, then control P and keep offset. And now in pose mode, when we move the head around, the eyes should follow, like that. So that's good. Also pose mode, if you don't know, you can just press Control Tab to go into pose mode, or you can do it up here. Let's add some controls for the eyes, because right now these are all of the deforming bones that we need really. We have, if you want, you can just stop right here, and make it so that this is just how the eyes rotate. But the problem is if you want the eyes to like track something, then it's a little harder to do it with this setup. You would have to move both eyes manually. So there is an easier way to set that up and make it kind of like you move one bone and they both just look at the bone. The way that I like to do that, we have to go into edit mode. Let's select both of these bones and Shift D to duplicate like that. And I'm just gonna move them to the front like this. It's not important to do this, but I also like the axes to match like the world axes. So Z is up, just like in the world right here. We have X going this way and Y going that way. And these bones are following that. I think it just makes things neater, but it's not very important. All right, let's give these some names. So these are gonna be controllers. I'm just gonna name this control I.L like that. If we want, we can actually just delete this. And then once we are done with this, then we'll just symmetrize it. So this is not a deforming bone. It's not going to be deforming any mesh or anything. So go to the bone properties right here and turn deform off. It isn't super important in this case because we already parented everything up. But if you turn deform off, then when you like parent things with automatic weights, it will ignore that bone. It won't try to make that like stick to the mesh or anything like that. So for control bones, it's important to make sure deform is off. And if you have multiple bones that you want to turn off, you can select all of them that you want and then hold Alt while you turn this on or off. So if I turn this off, it should make these bones also not be deforming because these ones were selected also. I can just turn them back on. I'll select both of them, hold Alt, turn that back on, and this one's still off. So let's parent this to the head. That way when the head turns, this will also turn. It looks like it already is parented to the head, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Now let's symmetrize this with right click, symmetrize. It named it properly. Let's add one in the middle to parent both of these two. So I'm going to select both of these, Shift S and cursor to selected. That should put the cursor right in the center right there. And now we can Shift A to add a new bone in, and it should appear where the cursor is. With the end selected right here, let's just turn this all the way down and pull it so it's like the same orientation. And let's just call this Control I. You can name it whatever you want, but I like to name all my control bones with control, and this is going to control both of the eyes. So this should be parented to the head. So select that, then select the head, Control P, keep offset. And now let's select both of these bones, the two side bones, then the middle bone last, Control P, and keep offset. So now if we're in pose mode right here, when we move the head, you can see that that will follow. And when we move this, you can see these two bones on the sides also follow. So what we want to do is make it so the eyes, like this eye will be looking at this bone and this eye will be looking at this bone. We can do that pretty easily with a damped track constraint. So I'll show you one way with one eye and I'll show you a different way with the other eye. So for the first one, we're going to do it very manual. Just select this eye bone, go to bone constraints, make sure it's the one with the bone on it. Otherwise, it's not going to work right because this one is for objects and this one is for bones and we're using bones. So bone constraints, go to damped track, and then we can select the target, which is just an armature. That's the name of the object. And then we have to select the bone, which is going to be Control I.L. like that. Now let's try moving this just to see, and you can see that it's already looking at it properly. To make this a little easier to see, let's change the bone style from octahedral to stick. That way we can actually see it properly. So yeah, now, also I'll turn the axes off. We don't need that. So yeah, now this is working properly. Also, if I move the central control bone, you can see that it's following. Let's do it a different way for this side. So a quicker way using shortcuts. Let's see if I can figure out the right order. I think you select the eye bone and then you shift select this one and then shift Control C and damped track. Nope, wrong way. Okay, so select the target or the control and then the eye bone, and then shift Control C. That's to add a bone constraint. And then we can just add damped track. And now this one should be matched up also. So now you can make it so, you move the central bone and both of the eyes are tracking it like that. Let's make the eyes a little more obvious that they're eyes. So I'm just gonna select both center points, Control plus to expand the selection, and I'll just pull them in like that. So it looks a little more like eyes now. Back into pose mode, you can see that they're actually tracking the eyes, or that the eyes are tracking these bones. Another cool thing is that because they're tracking these individual bones, if you want the eyes to kind of like become more cross-eyed or like wall-eyed, you can just scale the central bone, because the scale isn't really important. It's just tracking, I believe, like the end point of the bone. Yeah, we can actually see it's tracking the head of the bone, so it's tracking this part right here. And we can actually change that if we want. It gives us options in here, but it doesn't really matter much in this case. But yeah, so you can scale it up, you can rotate it if you want to do things like that, and that's pretty fun. Another thing that you can do if you want it so that when you move the head, like the eyes don't follow the head automatically, you can do a thing where this is not parented to the head bone. You can, let's unparent it with Alt P. Oh, we have to do that in edit mode. So Alt P, clear parent, and we can add a constraint instead. So now when I move this, you can see that the head bone, or that the controller is not parented to the head bone, and the eyes will track it as if it's like a fixed point in space, which is cool, but it's nice to have the option to switch back and forth. So what we can do is add a child of constraint to this. I believe the way that you would do that is you can do it the way I showed first, where you just add a bone constraint in here, child of, or you can do it kind of like the automatic method, where I believe this is like the target. I want this bone to be the child of this one. So this is like the target. Select that first, then you select this one where you actually want the constraint to be on this, and then shift Control C and then child of, and it's already parented to the head like that. So now we can move this, and it's kind of like it was before, except we have this influence slider and we can turn that down. See? So now, and you can animate this too. You could set it up to like so that a bone is controlling it, like with a driver. So yeah, you can now decide whether you want it to be like at a fixed point in space or whatever. And this is pretty cool, especially for like, say there's like a character talking and moving around and stuff, and you want them to be like looking at another character while they're moving around. You can make it so that their eyes like are always pointing in that direction. And yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to do that. And you can like move this around like that, and it's like, you know, it's more automatic, so you don't have to worry about animating everything manually. So yeah, that's kind of it. I think that's like all I really care to show for this one. Like I said, it's pretty simple for the most part. It's just damped track constraints on these eyes so that they're always looking at these targets. And the reason it looks so good, or, you know, isn't broken at all, is because these bones are like positioned with the head right in the center of the eye, and the eyes are perfectly spherical. If we take the eyes and we scale it so they're like flatter, you might not like the result as much because, because you can see they kind of are flat in a way that makes it so it's like clipping into the model and stuff like that. So it's not really, I don't know, it doesn't look as good. Whatever, it's the second channel, let's do it. I probably won't go into detail like too much, but one thing that you can do is add like a lattice to the eyes. So let's add a lattice right here. This is still totally a thing that I don't mess with very much. I don't do a lot of stuff with lattices, but you can set up a lattice, and then you can go to the eyes and add a lattice constraint, lattice right here. And we want this to be parented to use the only lattice in here. And then let's see, and then is it in edit mode? Yeah, in edit mode for the lattice, you select the lattice, and oh my goodness. You select the lattice and go into edit mode, and then you can scale this down to be flat like that. And then I believe what should be happening is we have to kind of like check the order of operations. So the eyes are first being deformed by the armature modifier right here, like this, and then it's being squashed by the lattice. So the eye will rotate, and then it will be squashed flat like this. So if we move this, now you can see the eyes are no longer like clipping into the side of the head and rotating in like a realistic way. They're going to be like flat in the same direction no matter how they rotate. So that is like a one way to kind of make flat eyes if you want something like that. This is one way to do it. I don't really like the lattices in general. Like there are kind of a lot of problems with them in my opinion. One is I believe you can't weight paint them, which is kind of a problem when you have something like if you want to control lattices with bones, which is another thing you can do is control them with bones. I feel like if you can parent a lattice to bones, you should be able to weight paint it also. I believe you can do shape keys, which is nice. Yeah, there are shape keys. So if we wanted, we could come in here, make a basis, add a second key, and then go into edit mode, make sure that it's selected over here. And we could like scale it out. So now we have like eyes that are poking out like this. And back in object mode, we can like, you know, turn this up and down. So you could get extra cartoony with this. I'm just going to turn on auto keyframing, go to the first frame and press play, and then move this around. So we have like a little animation always going while we're messing with stuff like that. And I'll just turn this off now. So yeah, you can see from the side now how this is, you know, reacting. And if we select the armature, we can, you know, change this while it's moving, and that's how it works. The order of operations is important, like I said. So if we select the eyes and shift this the other way around, now it's kind of broken in the original way that I showed. You want to make sure that the lattice is squashing the eyes after they're being rotated by the armature. So yeah, the other way of making an iRig that I have done before is using shaders. I'd rather show it than make it because it took a while to make. But for this character right here, I set it up so that instead of using like a lattice to deform it, you can kind of make whatever shape you want. And then I have some empties that are being referenced in the shader editor so that like I can move these wherever I want. And it's drawing the circle based on how far away it is from this empty right here. And then I'm having it so it shrink wraps to the mesh so that I can't move it too far away. If I turn this off, then you can see it can move too far away. And because it's drawing the circle based on how far away it is from this empty, then it will like make the eye smaller and stuff like that. So it's not really ideal, but I made it so you can like scale it all up and stuff like that. I think it's a lot of fun. And I also did the same thing for like eyelids. So that's all like using shaders instead of like a mesh, which is pretty cool. Let's look at the shader just so I can show you. It's not super complex, I guess. I mean, I don't remember actually in here. Okay, so it is a few layers of groups I have going on, but basically what it's doing is it's referencing an empty right here called pupil, and then it's just using a length, what do you call it? Vector math node set to length, and then a greater than, and that's how it like draws the circle. It's a pretty simple thing to do initially, but then to like get a very controlled setup is a little harder. I could probably make something like really quickly just to show how it works. Because once again, it's the second channel. Let's do whatever. Let's just do it very simply, I guess, with let's use a UV sphere, and I'll get an empty sphere right here. So let's drag it up. I'm just gonna make this like 0.1 in size like that. So let's select this, go to the shader editor. So make sure we turn this on, add a new thing. I want to, I can't just drag this, can I? No, I can't. Okay, let's add object in, no, how do I do this? I'm trying to remember. Oh, you can just use a texture coordinate node, and it has this option to reference an object. So I can just reference that empty right here. And then let's see, I probably want the object. So now it's looking at the object coordinates of the empty right here. And if I pin this, so when I select the empty, it's not gonna go away. You can see when I move this, it's moving those coordinates. And the point that it's like always placing this at is gonna be like the 0 point. So that's like where we wanna check from. So we can get the vector math node right here. Like I said, we set this to length. It's checking how far away from 0 everything is. So if we plug this in and take a look at that, now you can see it's showing like how far away everything is from 0. So how far away is the center point from 0? It's 0. That's the distance from it. Over here, it's getting white because it's like a little further apart. So like down here, this is probably like 2 meters wide, something like that. So like around here, it's gonna be like 1 meter, and we can measure all of this. And that's how I was like drawing the pupils. Is I just use a math node set to greater than. Let's see. So it's basically just saying like if this is greater, if the distance to 0, the distance from the empty is greater than 0.5, then draw white. If it's less than that, then draw black, like that. So now when I move this around, you can see like what's going on. Let's see. Yeah, and you can like scale it up and rotate it and stuff, which is pretty cool. This is extra easy with like circles, or this is like a spherical gradient right here. It just does that automatically, which is pretty convenient for eyes. If you wanted it to be like a square or something, then it would be a little more complicated. I believe though, like I could use a shrink wrap modifier. So under, oh, can I not? Oh, I can. There's a constraint. So I can set the target to the sphere, and now it can't leave the surface of the sphere like that. So now you have this, you can rotate it whatever way you want. We could even scale, let's see, I guess so we can actually see it a little better, plug it into the actual shader. But we could, if we wanted to, we could scale this like that. And now We don't have to worry about lattice or anything like that. This just works fine, which is pretty cool. And if you want, you could also use this to like control a color ramp if you want this to be like a different eye color. So let's see, the way that I would do this, if you want, you could just drop this in right here and then, you know, control it like that. But I like to kind of use this as a mask. So you could do a mixed color node right here, plug the greater than into the factor like that, and then you can kind of control the two colors like this. So the A is going to be black, this is going to be white. So we know that the color ramp should be plugged into the black slot right here. And now we should be able to kind of like do whatever color we want. There are ways of kind of making this a little more automatic, so you don't have to find like the edge right here. Basically, so like if this is all the way over here, that it's going to like naturally find the edge. There are ways of doing that, but I'm not gonna mess around with that in this one. But yeah, you could basically just like say we want like a blue eye, or let's do a red eye. Let's add another stop, make it red like that. Let's make this one also black like that. And then let's add another black one. We want to add a few so that we can like get it more crisp or whatever. Okay, and then it's just a matter of like placing these where you want them like that. Let's add another red one too. I'll just copy this with Control C, Control V. And now we can like make it as like tight as we want like that. So this is just like, you know, you can just kind of put whatever colors you want in here. If you want something more than just like spherical gradients, it becomes a little more complicated, but this is the very like most basic setup that I would do if I'm going to try to do it with shaders. You can't make this track bones as far as I know. So basically what you could do is just make it so that like this is tracking an empty and the empty is parented to a bone, which you can do. So that's like the way that I would go about doing it. That's the way that I have gone about doing it. It gets a little funny at the edges, but considering how little it distorts, I feel like it works pretty well. All right, that's enough of that. I showed how to do iRigs in a few different ways. More ways than I was planning. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something, and bye.